The Assassination of Joe, the Boss, Masseria, April 15th, 1931. Giuseppe Joe the Boss Masseria was a short, stocky Sicilian immigrant who had clawed his way to the very top of New York's criminal underworld during the chaotic years of Prohibition. Born in Sicily around 1886, he arrived in America as a young man and quickly made a name for himself as a ruthless and cunning leader. By the mid-1920s, Masseria had taken control of a vast empire that included illegal gambling, bootlegging, extortion rackets, and narcotics across much of Manhattan and Brooklyn. He lived like a king and demanded absolute loyalty, even declaring himself boss of all bosses. This kind of arrogance and greed eventually sparked one of the bloodiest conflicts in Mafia history, the Castellamarese War. The war pitted Masseria's forces against those of Salvatore Maranzano, another powerful Sicilian boss from the town of Castellammare del Golfo. For over a year, the streets of New York ran red as gunmen from both sides ambushed and killed each other in restaurants, on street corners, and in cars. By the spring of 1931, Masseria's own top lieutenants had grown tired of the endless bloodshed and his paranoid leadership. One of those men was the ambitious and visionary Charles "Lucky" Luciano. On the afternoon of April 15, 1931, Luciano invited Masseria to what was supposed to be a friendly meeting at Nuova Villa Tamaro, a modest Italian restaurant located at 2715 West 15th Street in Coney Island. Masseria arrived in his armored car, feeling relatively safe. He sat down in the back of the restaurant, ordered a simple meal of bread, wine, and coffee, and began playing his favorite card game, Pinochle, with a small group of men. Everything seemed normal until Luciano calmly excused himself from the table, saying he needed to use the restroom. That was the signal. Moments later, several gunmen, including Albert Anastasia, Vito Genovese, Joe Adonis, and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, burst into the restaurant and opened fire. Caught completely off guard, Masseria was shot 5 times. 4 bullets tore into his back and 1 struck him in the head. He collapsed forward onto the table, still clutching the playing cards in his dead hand. The killers walked out calmly, leaving behind guns, hats, and coats. The driver of the getaway car, Cairo Terranova, was so nervous that others had to pull him out of the driver's seat. This single afternoon execution in a quiet Coney Island restaurant effectively brought the Castellamarese War to an end. Luciano went on to eliminate Maranzano a few months later and created a new governing body called the Commission. This move changed the New York Mafia forever, shifting it away from chaotic old-world Sicilian blood feuds toward a more organized, business-like structure that would control organized crime in America for the next several decades. The barbershop murder of Albert Anastasia. October 25, 1957. Albert Anastasia was perhaps the most terrifying man in the American underworld during his prime. Born Umberto Anastasio in Italy in 1902, he rose to become the head of Murder, Inc., the enforcement arm that carried out hundreds of contract killings for the National Crime Syndicate throughout the 1930s and 1940s. People called him the Lord High Executioner because of his willingness to kill without hesitation. By the 1950s, he had become the boss of what would later be known as the Gambino crime family. However, his violent temper and growing ambition had made him dangerous even to his own allies. On the morning of October 25, 1957, Anastasia did something completely ordinary. He walked into the barbershop located on the ground floor of the Park Sheraton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. He sat down in the barber's chair, leaned back, and let the barber place a hot towel over his face for a relaxing shave and haircut. For a few moments, the most feared killer in New York looked like any other man enjoying a quiet morning routine. Then 2 masked gunmen stormed into the shop. They shoved the terrified barber aside and opened fire. Anastasia reacted with surprising speed. He jumped up from the chair and tried to fight back, but the gunman kept shooting. He staggered forward, crashing into the large mirrors lining the wall before collapsing dead on the floor in a pool of blood. This brazen daytime murder in one of Manhattan's busiest areas sent shockwaves through the city. Carlo Gambino, who had helped orchestrate the hit, took control of the family and turned it into the most powerful and wealthiest crime family in America. The assassination also marked the beginning of a new era of intense federal pressure on the Mafia